All right, so this is veins, part 2. This is probably where people get mixed up, just on because there's so many things in this one diagram. But we'll break it out for you. So we've talked about the cavernous sinus. We've talked about 5 things technically that it connects to. We talked about the superior ophthalmic, inferior ophthalmic, superior petrosal, and inferior petrosal. We know that those 2 guys also come from this sigmoid sinus. It's just something that we've already talked about. That was a mixture between cavernous and the dural sinuses that I talked about. We remember the pterygoid plexus and how it has these emissary veins that connect the 2 cavernous and pterygoid plexus together. We talked about this deep facial vein. We talked about this maxillary vein. So we really had already talked about all those. Pretty much everything else might be new. So let's go, we'll start with the maxillary vein and we'll go from there. So maxillary vein has the superficial temporal and it just follows the same path as its artery. So these 2 come down and create the retromandibular. So it's just the space after it is the retromandibular, and that drains the TMJ. The superficial temporal merges with the maxillary and the parotid gland. So this is all happening in the parotid gland. Then the retromandibular splits into 2, an anterior division and a posterior division. The posterior division is what forms the external jugular vein. And so we have posterior and we have the postauricular. So these 2 guys form that external jugular vein. And how I differentiate internal and external is this one travels pretty much with the neck muscle, the sternocleidomastoid, but it drains into the subclavian. So it just runs down the neck. You can do a catheter, as one of the slides, in your neck, and that's how they'll do it, through this external. Okay, so let's talk about this anterior division. So anterior meets up with this facial. And when these 2 meet up, it forms this common facial. So the common facial is what drains into the internal jugular vein. Internal jugular vein does most of the drainage in the head because it comes and does this sigmoid sinus, and then it has all the stuff from the facial aspect coming into this internal jugular vein. Hence why it's protected in that carotid sheath. So we're pretty much done with this part. These lingual ones, they follow pretty much the lingual arteries as well. So we have the lingual, dorsal lingual, which would be draining the posterior portion of the tongue, and deep lingual would be doing the anterior portion of the tongue. So let's come up here, and all we have is really these little ones left. So we have deep facial again, which would be deep to the facial, right? So we're gonna have the facial just coming down across the face. And then the last of all, we have this superior orbital and superior trochlear, and these guys are just up by the eye. But other than that, I mean, that's really all you need to know. Teeth, they drain into the pterygoid plexus. So here, I just drew this real quick. This is like that superior vena cava. So we know that we have the external jugular vein, internal jugular vein, and then this little branch, the little one that I drew, is that anterior jugular vein. But all this drains into superior vena cava and then it just runs through the heart again. So hopefully that's kind of a summarized version of this difficult picture.